Okay, you are live, sir.
All right, thank you. This is a public meeting of the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission Information Technology and Systems Improvement Committee. It's January 7th, 2025 at 3:01 p.m. Go ahead and call the meeting to order and we'll take roll call.
Yes, sir. Jeffrey Glover.
David Berg present for Colonel Glover.
Dave Byers.
Here.
Laura Conover. Jerry Sheridan. Steve Stahl.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We will, not sure if some of the people who joined late heard you, but this is live streaming to allow stakeholders, members of the public to access today's conversation. We'll go ahead and move to agenda item number 2, approval of the November 7th, 2024 meeting minutes. Did everybody have a chance to review those, or were there any suggestions or changes, edits to those? All right, seeing none, I would take a motion to accept the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the minutes be approved as presented.
Thank you, sir. Motion by Mr. Byers, second.
Second.
Thanks, sir. Motion and second. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passed unanimous. Agenda item number 3, computerized criminal history, CCH improvement working group. In our last meeting, we had, as is reflected in the minutes for anybody that needs a refresher, we had discussed at length the search report, specifically some questions and issues related to disposition reporting and percentages in general. And we'd had a presentation from Amber Slowinski at DPS on the CCH process, some of the efforts that DPS has made with training, education, compliance, and then specifically on the search report. And then we had made a committee unanimous recommendation for the council, which was then unanimously adopted in the subsequent council meeting or commission meeting, to establish at the direction of this committee a working group to provide recommendations back through the committee to the commission on the search report and how to improve some of the processes and findings that were reported there. And so coming into this meeting, I know staff has been working, as well as on the DPS side, there's been some additional review and work that's gone into what would those next steps look like. Lloyd, I know that you and your team have put together some initial frameworks and structure along with some recommendations. Would you care to present those?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a slide posted that lists, excuse me, I came down with COVID, so I'm walking wounded today. Some of the recommendations included in the search report: development of a technical architecture specifications, development of standards for sharing between ADRS and the computerized criminal history, development of standards for integrating county attorney case management systems with ADRS. That includes charge modifications, enhancements, or additions. Perhaps the development of an information broker to facilitate the receiving transformation of data between agencies, expand the use of mobile fingerprint solutions, develop recommendations for changes to court retention policies. It has been noted that court retention policies are out of sync or challenging to complete criminal history. Some of the retention policies are at issue. They don't hold them as long as perhaps we might need. One of the recommendations was develop or adopt rules that require fingerprint capture at initial appearance, develop or adopt standards for no files. This is with prosecution, and develop or expand the train the trainer program and expand online learning opportunities. As we looked at these recommendations that were in the search report, we organized them into two working group buckets or two working group areas. The first, for the technology, we do not have in Arizona a standard data architecture or common or shared data architecture. And that while there are some standards that exist, a common overarching one does not. The top three technology recommendations sort of refer to that, developing standards or a recommendation of how we will share information in the future. The information broker piece can either be separate or as part of the shared data architecture project, and that would be additional support to help facilitate information sharing between the groups. The other recommendations are in a policy bucket, and what we would recommend is convening a group to look at maybe getting some clarity around the issues with court retention dates and how that has created challenges for complete and accurate criminal history, to explore opportunities for fingerprint capture at initial appearance, some of the issues and challenges there, and then to look at the issue of no files and how that contributes to inaccurate or incomplete criminal history. So these were, as we look to convening the working group or working groups and providing them with instructions or as they move forward, we looked at organizing it around these two areas. And as I present that to you now, Mr. Chair, for the committee to discuss and further enhance. Further develop.
Do we have any discussion and questions?
Well, this is Dave. I guess I have a couple. Fortunately, I wasn't at the last meeting when you had this discussion, so I'm playing catch up. Separate from this report and this effort, DPS had announced that you're going to all electronic submissions at a future date. I forget the date. Was it like somewhere in 26?
July 1 of 26.
Yeah. And because of that, I know I've been in a few meetings with the DPS staff that are in the trenches and some of our staff. And we recommended there be a group set up with stakeholders because there are some policy issues that I guess coincide with this. For example, I think DPS system doesn't take, when you transmit the Title 13 codes down to the specific charge, it doesn't go that far. It's at a higher level. Unfortunately, prosecutors and courts, though, don't want to make a decision to roll it up to a higher level. So that was, I remember, one issue that we had to work out. My point is, I wonder if there's some overlap here, that we don't have two groups working on this at the same time. Maybe there should be, because they're all the same people, maybe we should have a group that works all this out in conjunction with the go live date of July of 26. And so when you talk about architecture, usually those are technical, but this is kind of a technical deal as to what we're going to transmit to DPS. So I just wanted to point that out. Secondly, you know, I've been dealing with this exact same problem, and our numbers haven't changed for about 40 years. But the single biggest group of problems is the courts have no idea what was originally charged by the police. All we can deal with is disposing of charges filed in the court by the prosecutor. The only group that can translate between the two are the prosecutors. So I guess that's where you're getting to, where the county attorneys will provide the data, because they have to translate from what the original police charges were to what was charged in court. And also they deal with the no charges, which is probably 40 or 50% of all the arrests. My final thing is, I don't know what you're talking about with court retention policies. Jesus, we keep these documents for decades. How can they be? I mean, Justice Court stuff we keep for at least, I think the citation's 10 years. Superior Court's longer than that. What's the retention policy problem? If we haven't figured out the disposition in that length of time, and that's after a case is closed. So if a person absconds, the case isn't closed. So do you know what the problem they're pointing out? What records are destroyed that impact the disposition process? Anybody know?
I can speak to that a little bit. Lloyd, do you have a specific example with a number on it before I get a little more general?
I do not. Let me go ahead, sir. I'll look that up.
The other thing, go ahead, David.
No, I'm sorry. I should have been keeping notes. I'm gonna lose track of the items here. So if Lloyd doesn't have them at his fingertip, I'll get with some of the DPS staff and I'll get the group some examples of retention period issues because I do hear that commonly from the DPS side, and then specifically, as we all know, unfortunately, to your point. It's not uncommon for DPS to have a truck pull up from some random organization, right, with boxes of disposition entries that are well over a decade, right? They're and I don't think it's informative to this conversation, but I can get examples of that. But we know we have retention issues. I will get some examples if Lloyd doesn't have those, but we're dealing with entries in some cases that haven't been entered that are being found and then submitted to DPS 20, 25, 30 years after they were initially dealt with.
Well, of course, all that would go away if we electronically submitted them and you take them. And that's been our point for years is we like to submit them, but there's been so many problems in submitting them and getting them kicked back that's gone on and on and on. So I think if we resolve this problem related to the process to make it all electronic by July of 26, the retention policies probably aren't going to be an issue. But I'll be interested to learn more about that. And then these fingerprint captures, over the years I've learned that we use the word fingerprint, but that's not what we need. Fingerprinting somebody after arrest doesn't help at all. You have to do the O1 fingerprint. The O1 fingerprint is the only fingerprint that'll start a criminal history. And the only people authorized to do that are the arresting agency or the sheriff at booking. It used to be only the arresting agency. And of course, officers would drop them off at the sheriff's office, and the sheriff wasn't authorized really to do that. We changed those statutes a few years ago. But if we took fingerprints, you say here at the initial appearance court, well, it's got to be the sheriff doing because it's got to be the O1 print. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. You got prints, but it's not going to start a criminal history. And this is, this is even, the whole purpose of that was when you arrest somebody, you got the right person. And when they hand them off to the sheriff at booking, they got the right person. Anything after that, you don't know that you've got the right person who was originally arrested. And we know we've had people substitute for other people and so forth. So anyway, I just want to point out that problem that we really have got to get the fingerprints taken by the sheriff or the arresting agency very early in the process. The initial appearance court might work for those, they should be, if they're booked in, they should have been fingerprinted. Are you talking about people summoned into initial appearance? Yeah, well, then you got another problem because you have to have the sheriff do that. The court can't do it unless we change those statutes.
Yeah, a lot of those are ones that are summoned or they were cited and released, right? They're delayed, and even with statutory changes over the last few years, increasing the initial charges that require fingerprints, I don't think anybody would admit to it on camera or in writing, but there's still a lot of, especially in outlying areas, where I don't think that's happening on some site and release stuff, right? Just because of lack of infrastructure or lack of staffing, right? Any number of issues that we've all talked about. A lot of those I don't even think are happening. So it is a big problem.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. We'll order people go and the sheriffs won't have anybody to do. I mean, it's just a kind of a mess in terms of trying to get this done in a highly consistent and high volume way. So anyway, okay, I'll be interested in learning more, but we've had these exact same issues for 4 decades.
I do think the last bullet point you have under technology, Lloyd, is one that we need to not lose sight of. I think it's easy for us to understand, and it's easy for ACJC, for example, to support, and for DPS to support. I know DPS, even in the training that we're doing with ADRS and things that aren't necessarily designed to, for example, train on mobile fingerprinting, we're really advertising and pushing the mobile solutions and trying to support agencies in deploying those. I mean, the most recent example is, we're working with Santa Cruz County to deploy, I think it's 7 different, full 10 print tablet fingerprint devices into the field so that they have them at both their superior courts or both their court locations. I'm going to get this wrong somewhere, but anyway, at their court locations and for their deputies to use, so that they can go fully electronic. And so we keep pushing that everywhere that we go so that we can try to push this on the front end. And as we do it and roll it out, the cops really like it, right? Because it helps eliminate, like you were just saying, a lot of the identity issues on the front end as well.
Yeah, the only thing I point out about this is because it's come up many times in my career, I guess. We'll get people fingerprinted after the booking. Let's say they weren't fingerprinted. We get them later on, but they don't count. And so judges get very confused. They say, I've ordered this guy, or this guy got fingerprinted in my court or whatever. But DPS says that's not an 01 print, so it doesn't create a criminal history. So I think we just need to really be clear, because I think what we're talking about here is creating the 01 print to create a criminal history. And other fingerprints that are taken don't qualify for that.
Yeah. Also, if I can remember, I'm trying to go back to your, and forgive me, I just had a blank mind there for a second. You made a great point on the first point I didn't want to lose track of and come back to. Do you remember your first point? The redundant work groups, right? You were meeting with DPS and you were talking about.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Before that meeting that I believe you're referring to, I was unable to make that meeting, but I had several discussions before and after that meeting with DPS staff. And I'm not sure what all they communicated, which I'm sure was accurate and great. But one of the points that I made to them is exactly what you're just saying, that I think there's a lot of overlap. We just hadn't gotten to a point with kind of transitioning some of the focus of this work group to addressing that search report and these missing dispositions. And so our conversation had been around the need to have a very complete, holistic, whatever you want to call it, multifaceted work group to address all of these. And so I agree. I think that goal can be achieved with this work group. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, I think you're right. I know your staff and our staff, our computer people all got together, went through, identified some number, maybe a dozen issues. Some of them very technical, but really important, like how far you go in the 13 code to get it into DPS's system. But there's a whole series of those things. And when we looked at it, we said we need prosecutors here and some other players. And really, it's kind of we thought it should be a DPS lead. I guess ACJC could also be the lead. But let's not have 2 groups. Let's get the right people together and work through these things. And then and we need to do it soon enough to get policies changed, statutes, or systems changed in order to make all that work.
DPS's desired position, whatever you want to call it, would be that we think it's ideal if that outcome is achieved by by this working group through ACJC. And you know how it is. Our DPS staff go out and they're kind of the auditors, the compliance people, the trainers, right? And so I think having a different group that's helping, in essence, not only provide best practices, if you will, but almost refereeing it, right? It's much more than just that auditing and compliance standpoint, because sometimes it's just the nature of the job. Sometimes DPS is the bad guy, right? Like, hey, this doesn't meet this criteria. We can't do this. And you guys have all experienced that sometimes, unfortunately. But so I think having it not be DPS and having it be ran through ACJC like this is ideal.
Well, that makes sense because ACJC obviously has all the different stakeholders together. But one of the things we thought would drive it is that DPS was going to, the director needed to put a letter out to the stakeholders saying, we are moving to an all electronic system on July 1 of 2026, or whatever date you picked, because we thought that was what's going to drive it. Otherwise, it's just, we've been talking about this for, like, say, decades. But if we actually we've got to get this done now, fix this thing by a certain date. It really will mobilize people. And I agree with you. ACJC staff and people could pull this together, but we better get going. That's not that far away.
Hey, David.
Yes, sir.
This is Steve. Could you get a agenda item on the next Chiefs of Police meeting, Arizona Chiefs of Police, along with the letter that Dave is suggesting? And then that way they get your face in front of them expressing, because everybody's got different bosses, right? And if you express that this is coming from ACJC and it actually is a good thing to keep from redundant efforts by different jurisdictions and that you will help them, you can explain it further, and you'll have a captive audience in that meeting.
Yes, sir. I think we can. I think that's a great idea. So short answer is yes. The only reason we haven't put out a letter from DPS or the director was because we wanted to take the time to ideally have this, at least the initial broad discussions with the committee and whatever work group we put together in the next month or so. Because we have a ton. I'll just speak for myself, right? We've been doing this for a long time, but sometimes I worry that especially on the DPS side, we don't know what we don't know, right? And so we put out a letter like that, and we take a stance on here's the date, and then somebody, and maybe a really small agency that has a unique concern, or a really large agency that has a unique concern, or courts come back with a consideration that we completely missed. Right. And now we're adjusting and scrambling and then your message loses clarity. So I agree with you completely. I just want to make sure we're not missing some key factor or consideration before we put the date out, right? That might potentially change the date. Because we could say it's, December 30th of 26, right? We tried our real conversations internally started in May or June of this year. And so we purposely said, hey, let's pick 2 years out as our goal date. Right. Well, now we're already, to Dave's point, we're already 6 or 7 months in, right? Past the decades we've already done. So we've lost a little bit of time. I'm not trying to ramble. I completely agree with you. My only consideration would be maybe let's see how much progress we can make in getting some additional feedback between now and the next committee meeting and then do it. Would you be amenable to that?
Well, I know what you're saying, but all projects like this sometimes change dates, and it's not unusual. See, I don't think you're going to mobilize. There's so many things going on all the time. It's just hard to mobilize this as a priority until somebody puts a stake out there and says, we expect the date to be July 1. Now, if we get into it and you do find something, so, oh, God, we can't do that, then you modify the date. People will understand that. That's not a problem. But until you guys actually announce, boom, we're doing this, I just don't think you're going to get the players. They're going to be focused on other crises. So my encouragement is to do something that gets this thing launched. We've lost 6 months. And the list that we have is much more detailed than this. We've got the specific things that our staff came up with and said, these have got to be decided and fixed. And I'm just a little worried the clock's ticking on this. So anyway, my encouragement is to get a letter out. Also, I see our director here. We probably should put this on the ACJC agenda. I guess this committee could report, but it's got to. We can't report that you're going to this all electronic system until something official comes from you guys.
I got it. You both make very convincing arguments. For what it's worth, the letter's already been drafted, so I'll change the date on it and we'll get it to the colonel for signature. I don't disagree with you, right? I go back and forth on, you try to, and I think both your points are really well made, right? Until you put a goal out there and let people know, hey, the clock is ticking. You need to make this a priority. Sometimes people aren't going to make it a priority. So I'll get with the director's office and staff, and we'll move ahead with the letter.
I understand it, David. DPS doesn't want to be the big bad bully, saying this is the way it's going to be and stuff like that. But if you have us, ACJC, backing you, saying this is for the good, and it has to be done, and because it has to be done, we've set this date. If you have any questions, now you've already given them FaceTime and they know to contact you should they have any questions or concerns.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, this is Andy. I think this would be a great topic for our March meeting. Give you your opportunity to do your process and get the letter out, and then we can do a nice update at the March meeting and then talk about how we're going to support that initiative.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, we will get the letter out by the end of January. And when it's spoken to in that meeting, whether it's staff or whether it's the committee, we can emphasize for the minutes, right, for the writing that goes out or for any public, right, but we can emphasize for the record some public safety examples of why it's important, right? This is not a arbitrary administrative or technical burden that's being put on people, right? So we can relate this specific, to citizen safety and constituent outcomes. So we'll work on that as well. Any other thoughts or discussion on that agenda item? Lloyd, did you have additional?
No, sir, but we'll connect with the working committee that exists between DPS and the courts and ensure smooth project management moving forward.
Well, to be clear, there was not really a committee. Our staff and their staff met. We were waiting for DPS to make the announcement and put together a group. So we'll hook you up with our staff, and DPS has some great people. So I think they'll be forming a committee and you got to add prosecutors for sure to it. I can't remember if there's any other stakeholders we identified, but our people have the notes and all that. We're ready to go when you guys put a group together.
Okay, so DPS will put out the letter, and then the people identified on both sides can be represented or included in the working group. And then for everyone else, in the meantime, between now and the next meeting or at the next meeting, committee meeting, please bring any additional recommendations for specific people or parties that need to be represented in this group. And Dave, and then I will also get with the DPS side to get any specific recommendations, not just from a stakeholder standpoint or a policy stakeholder standpoint, but also from our technical side of the house on people that need to be involved that weren't in that discussion as well, so that we can try and hopefully by the next meeting actually kick off the working group.
Yeah, that would be good, because as I started to think about this, we do this in March. Hell, we're only a year away then. So anyway, Lloyd, we can talk, and I can try to hook you up with our staff who know the details. You might want to see about getting something organized even before our March meeting, get it ready to go.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, Mr. Byers, yes, we'll do that.
All right, thank you. Anything else on agenda item number 3? All right, agenda item number 4, Nick's task force update.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Oh, sorry, Lloyd, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Jump the gun. Since our last meeting in November, we've made some progress on the potential mental health pickup order project. I briefed the committee on the Title 36 statute and the complex civil commitment process in Arizona. We hosted a large planning session with subject matter experts from crisis services to healthcare providers, attorneys, police and public safety, to try to get a better understanding of the scope of the issues from the practitioner perspective. The meeting was really productive, and there was agreement that there's definitely an opportunity for process improvement, and particularly as it relates to law enforcement having access and visibility to information when needed. A big thing we heard was getting the actual order into the officer's hands. The physical piece of paper is challenging. Law enforcement is spending a significant amount of time trying to get the right paperwork. They may have to track down case managers, court clerk staff, liaisons, just to try to find and or validate the information that's on that order. And some agencies, as we've heard in prior projects, are using pen and paper to handwrite orders, often illegible, and again, unable to verify and validate information. So there's no standard way of gathering data. And additionally, there's no way to gather safety data for law enforcement. Law enforcement noted that it's sometimes on the petition. It depends. And it may be on the pickup order, but it's not always, and it's inconsistent. So in terms of next steps, we're going to focus on gathering the information needed from the petition and applications from the screening agencies in both Maricopa and Pima counties to gather kind of what information's being captured. We want to start this at the beginning of the process, really see how Maricopa and Pima specifically are doing this at first, and then kind of work our way out to the outer counties, working on a process map by county. So we're working on developing those questions to ask the folks when we get in front of those screening agencies, and working on outlining the problems by county. So want to see, are there capacity issues at the evaluation agencies? Are there information with accessibility or challenges with accessibility to information, provider shortages? What are they experiencing in the counties? And then kind of prioritize what problems we can tackle and what the scope of this project really is. I mentioned at our last meeting, but in terms of volume, mental health pickup orders are issued. This is like 4 to 5 times the size of AZ Point in terms of how many are being issued across the state. But to that point, we don't have a baseline really number to begin kind of tracking the current state because we don't have any centralized system. We're working now on identifying metrics that would be needed to kind of get that baseline information. How many are being issued per year? How many are being served? How many are unserved? There's just no way to track this information currently. So we want to try to pull that information together and get at least an estimate of some of those baseline numbers so we can kind of track this as we move forward. And then we want to reconvene with our large group. So we have kind of these workings happening individually right now, but we want to get the large group with the attorneys, crisis service staff, all back together after we've got a little bit better understanding of the scope and kind of where we want to go. We also have our next NICS task force meeting tentatively scheduled for February 13th. So we're finalizing the agenda for that. We should have that out to the members by the end of this week. Our plan for that meeting is to have 3 focus areas. The first being lifetime no contact orders, second being AZ Point, and then the third being this mental health pickup order topic. So we want to brief the task force members on those projects and then, brief them on potential upcoming legislative changes that we're seeing as the session begins, and then start working to outline the scope and requirements for the new proposed projects that may be coming down the pipe. With that, Mr. Chair and members, I'm available for questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, Shayla, I'm not sure I'm understanding this. AZ Point does about 25,000 protective orders a year, I think. There can't possibly be 100,000 pickup orders for mental health. You're talking about a Superior Court order after someone's been civilly committed?
Yeah, Maricopa County alone, from what we've heard, is doing at least 30,000 just here in Maricopa. So Pima's probably doing similar, and obviously the smaller counties will be doing smaller in terms of volume, but a large undertaking for sure. Maybe not 5 times, but 3 to 4.
No. Well, I got to check into this. First of all, you generally can take Maricopa and double it for the state. They usually do about 50%. Pima is about 20%, then of the state, the rest. So, if they're really worth 30,000 in Maricopa, you're probably talking about 60,000 statewide. But I need to check. I've never heard of anything to that volume. There's not 60,000 civil commitments in a year. I don't think there's anything close to that. We have that data. So why don't you contact me and we can walk through it. I'm misunderstanding something. But there's been a big increase, like 1,000% increase in mental health cases, but there's nothing close to 60,000 mental health cases in Maricopa County.
Yeah, I'll send you an email. We can connect on the data.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing, I just want to express a frustration, I guess. We have Nick's task force. They come up constantly with new projects and wind up for the courts and DPS to do. But at the end of the day, they never get done. We program things, whether it's ADRS, whether it's we have the mental health system that goes out to law enforcement. At the end of the day, we do all this stuff, and then we find that nobody's using it. Nobody follows up. It doesn't get implemented statewide. It just sort of sits. And to me, if we're going to take on any more projects, there's got to be some way to guarantee that there's a way to manage it all the way through to the end so it's actually implemented, rather than all the projects we have, including, we have the Lawrence project, for example. That's terrific, but it sits there and it's only in a few jurisdictions. And I just don't want us to take on more projects until we fix the ones we've done, just haven't implemented them. So just some venting.
Other questions? Shayla, on the mental health discussion, from your perspective with the research that you've done and looking into it, and then the different, data points you've gotten back from a discovery standpoint, and I realize that maybe you haven't formalized this and it's not a full recommendation, but what do you think success looks like with a system at the end of the journey, so to speak? What does success look like?
It's hard, Mr. Chair. It's hard to visualize the system at this point in the process. I think we need to start with standardizing, which is difficult in a state that's as diverse as Arizona. We learned this with AZ Point, but there has to be some sort of agreement in the process on how people are doing things that still allows for flexibility for counties that have different needs, right? The big takeaway I heard from the larger discussion was that law enforcement is spending so much time trying to find this information and validate it. And ultimately, they want to get these individuals that are eligible for Title 36 into the treatment that they need, right? We want to get them treatment as quickly and carefully, as quickly as they need and carefully, right? And get them off the streets if they fit the criteria. So it's hard to visualize what that system will look like. There's constant comparisons to AZ Point, and I don't know that we have the model, right, for how this could work. And that's getting data into a standardized format, into a system that law enforcement and even like behavioral health and crisis services staff could see and access, and then just really digitizing the process from there. Tying it to NICS, once a person is on Title 36 and is in that process, they become ineligible to purchase firearms. And DPS gets that information right now. How, I'm not quite sure. I haven't gotten to that part of the process, but that's not automated, right? So I assume DPS staff is having to enter that information. And there's better ways, I think, to do that and utilize resources, decrease staff time, decrease time trying to find information. We want law enforcement to have the information they need as quickly as they can, but as accurately as possible too, right?
Well, again, several years ago, we built a mental health system that goes through DPS and could go to the squad car level to alert the law enforcement officer that the person is mentally ill. And what we've heard is police do not want to use it. The law enforcement lawyers are telling them do not ask for that information. I don't think it comes back when you do a wanted person checks and so forth. You have to make a special request because they don't know what to do when they get it. So there's a guy in the car who's has been declared mentally ill and he's got a gun. The police don't want to take the weapon. So this is my frustration. We keep building these things, but then somehow there's a breakdown between us and the people on the street. And to me, I just keep wasting our time and our programmers' time to do these things. We've also just recently built and launched, literally recently, we have a system to provide mental health treatment orders and commitment orders to providers and to prosecutors right now. It's up, and you just have to get credentials right now to get into that system to get it. I don't know that the pickup orders are in there, but I suppose they could be. But that's built, and actually, Andy, that came from one of the grants from you guys. You know that the reduced of street violence, and that thing is up and running. So we've got some things in place, but every time we build it, we work with DPS, and DPS says either they make a decision or local law enforcement makes a decision. They don't want it.
So Dave, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I might, Dave, could we, maybe you, Lloyd, and I meet and kind of get a list of these projects that you're thinking or you're seeing as we've done this work, but now they're languishing, so that maybe it is a question of we just haven't done enough outreach that folks don't know about it, or maybe there's some questions that we need to be asking to folks on why the decision was made to not utilize something that, again, for our purposes, we thought wanting to understand mental health information would be good for the officer's safety.
We did too.
And if that's not the case, then I agree. I don't want to keep doing projects that nobody wants to use.
Yeah, there's a disconnect between what the next committee comes up with. They're good ideas. We agree, we could have do them, and then when we roll it out, people have at the street level other ideas, or the law enforcement legal advisors have other ideas.
Steve, I've never heard from our general counsel or legal advisor or from anybody else that information isn't something we would want our troopers to know. Have you heard that anywhere?
I have not, David, but part of me says, especially as Shayla said, the rural jurisdictions, they may not want to do the back end work on it because they don't have as good of electronic system as DPS does, and Phoenix and all the local jurisdictions in metropolitan Phoenix. And because it's so much work on the back end, they want to act like I didn't see that information. We gave them input at the very beginning saying, how can this help you? And we let them help write the parameters so that they had officer safety first and foremost when we wrote this dang thing. So for them to say I don't want to use it, to me is a cop-out.
Well, I think it's the urban departments also, Steve. What I'm hearing from my staff is that they've been advised that if they ask the question and they give the information that the person's subject to Title 36, they don't want the liability. They don't want to have to take action on the street in that situation. So they do not want to know. And Davin, I was just told this week that there has been a change at DPS where when they do a wanted person check and a license plate check, they've removed the mental health flag from that. So you have to make a separate request. And that, what I've been told, that was part of the reason they don't want that information. To me, it's crazy. But I'm not on the street, so let's walk through all these things to figure it out, because it's almost every project we've done is turning out this way. The
it's a shock to me, David.
Mental health, they're all in trouble.
Yeah, if indeed it's an extra check for them to have to run, that's news to me, because it was designed to immediately pop up when they ran their regular wants and warrants check.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to check on the DPS side because I thought the same thing. I thought it was automatically done, and I thought that was the beauty of the system. And I'm not the lawyer in the room, but I don't buy that it's liability, that we limit liability by not knowing there's an order. I think it's the exact opposite of that. If we have
Exactly.
the check and we're choosing not to, then now we're introducing liability. So I think that's craziness. I can see everybody's busy and understaffed, right? So it's just like, you have some cops that are going to go out and make traffic stops and not even run somebody for warrants, right? They're going to scratch their ticket or warning and move on down the road. I can see that. I don't like it. I don't support it, but I can see that. But I don't know. I'll call it laziness. I think that's a laziness discussion, not a liability discussion.
And
I
David,
will follow up before our next meeting. I will follow up and get an answer on the message switch piece. And is it not coming back when we do the main query?
Yeah.
and
And
I'm
just,
with you, David. I think the liability is higher if we allow that. If that officer on the street allows that guy to go free and he harms someone else, our liability is a lot higher, or that officer's liability is a lot higher.
right.
And so I
And-
think it's foolish.
And if I could, Mr. Chairman and Dave, the way that this structure's been set up, it just doesn't come from the NICS task force up to the commission right away. There's two committees in between that deal with having folks from law enforcement and the technical aspects of law enforcement reviewing. And again, if somebody's going to, that's when there should be issues being raised of whether or not somebody is or isn't going to use something. I think we've tried to build in as best we can the ability for law enforcement to give that input. Again, doesn't mean something may not change over time, but again, if we're hearing this stuff, then yeah, again, maybe it's we need to have some capacity built into our schedules to be doing follow-up and training or whatever it might be to make sure that folks are not forgetting why we did this stuff in the first place. So I'd love to have that conversation with you, Dave, of the things you're hearing so we better understand it.
And we've all seen it, right? On all the projects, like we even in the last few committee meetings, right? We've talked about how there's, especially, I don't know, in my experience, especially as we start to get projects toward the last phase and implementation or post-implementation, we think we've solved a problem and pushed it out. And then there's always this minority of people or stakeholders who either didn't get what they want or they don't like it or they don't want the administrative or financial burden or, right? And so you start getting this creep away from what the solution was. And that sounds like part of what's happening on these. So I think we're all interested to see where we deviated on some of these projects and how to fix it. Other discussion or questions for Shayla? All right, seeing no questions. Agenda item number 5, update on current CJ Systems improvement projects. Lloyd.
I'll be brief. I'll give an update on the crime victim notification system. We have currently 23 agencies fully implemented with the crime victim notification system. This is both Vine and what's now called Community Connect, formerly SpiderTech project. We've got a product. We have 5 agencies that are in the queue currently. And are moving forward. We have just over 5,000 served officers, or sworn officers being served on the system as of today. We had 3 agencies drop out from our original list of agencies. I've scheduled some meetings or requested some meetings with the agencies to get a better idea of why they chose not to move forward with the current CVNS. And I'll try to report back any information that I've gotten. In addition to the 3 that have chosen not to move forward, we have several others that are joining in, about 5 other agencies that have expressed interest and that were not part of the original group. The initial feedback that we're getting from law enforcement has been very positive, both to the product, but also the service that they're receiving from the vendors. So I'll try to get better clarity as to why some are choosing not to move forward. It might we've made it a priority to remove whatever barriers that exist for them to get implemented. So we'll see what they say moving forward. we are waiting for the grant announcements for our next round of grants, and we'll report that out to the committee as we receive that. And with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Have any questions? Who do you know who the 5 agencies are that are expressing interest in coming on board, Lloyd?
I don't have contract. I'm not sure I should reveal that
Okay.
in a public forum, but I can share with you. And I'll certainly announce them once we have contracts signed and they've joined in.
Got it. Makes sense. Any other questions for Lloyd on agenda item number 5? All right. Seeing no questions and no further updates on that, have we received any requests or calls from the public?
Mr. Chair, Sasha, have we received any requests to speak?
No, we have not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Andy. If I could, I know you're going to break and we're going to turn the meeting off, but if I could make a request for Dave and Chief Stahl to stay on after everything gets shut down. I have a couple issues I need to chat with both of them.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And I have one issue, I guess, to add. Maybe it's under Lloyd's update report. Maybe a year ago, we had an officer shot and killed up in Yavapai County, making an arrest. And it led to a standing up a pretrial release task force. Making a short story, one of the recommendations that come out of that task force was to refine the Form 4, to completely redo it, to make it more effective. Judges were pointing out how poorly the form questions were, and they weren't getting good information from law enforcement to make a good decision to hold somebody in jail or release them. So we got agreement on that. The Supreme Court adopted, that's a court form. They adopted the new form and mandated that it be actually has to be used by a date certain this year. I don't remember the exact date. But Lloyd, I think Andy, it'd be a great project for ACJC to get behind to make sure that in all the jails, the Form 4 process is automated, because part of the problem is sometimes they're handwritten and nobody can read them. And then there's a training component that we're putting together to provide training to law enforcement. But the idea was this form, the way it's been redesigned, will provide much better direction to the law enforcement officer and therefore what to put in it, and then better information for the judge to make the release decision. So it's something in the works. I hope we pay attention to it.
Thank you. I had not heard that at all. And I know DPS just had a meeting with Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and one of the main points of the discussion was all the initial appearance, Form 4, booking paperwork, stuff that's getting missed by submitting investigators on the front end and the problems that's causing. And it didn't come up in that conversation either. And I'm sure they know about it. So I'm just curious.
That's my worry. I don't know, what everybody knows about it. We've tried to put it out there, but now that I know it's going to effect in 25, we really need to get everybody, I'll have to probably write to everybody again, get them focused on this. Because I know our staff is developing the training, the forms are done, but we really need to get it, institutionalized out there. It'll be better for everybody.
Okay. Any other add-ins under agenda item number 5? All right. Seeing none, our next meeting will be scheduled. The date will be put out, but it will be on the same cadence that we've been having, which will be 2 weeks before the next full commission meeting after the January meeting. And then we'll do some of the other follow-up in between and try to get that into Lloyd and staff. So any questions on the next meeting? Any issues with the cadence that we've been doing, or are we good? All right. Thank you. With nothing else on the agenda and the final item concluded, I'll take a motion to dismiss.
So moved.
All right. Moved, seconded, and thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Be safe.